Moin moin y'all. Sorry this one took so long to get out. Been busy with other stuff and things. This is part of the trap base building series, but you guys still had questions about the breakable vendor. One negative to playing on public teams is if we are max caps, other players might come by and buy us out. So there are a couple of options for us. Have a camp with no vendor. Take everything out of the vendor. Store the vendor, which I do at a few camps. Put it in a locked or sealed off room. Or use a breakable vendor. I will show some camps with various setups. And then I will show you how to build it like in part 2. This is actually Freddy's first camp. I put him here right out of the vault, so he could mule. I then did the bum challenge with him several years ago. At this camp I just store and place the vendors. They are usually away if I am on public teams and using sleazies. I do this at a couple of camps because it was easier than doing a breakable vendor. And the shit shack is the same. I usually only use this camp when doing the story, but occasionally I run it. But perfect placement isn't always easy. I store the vendor at a few other camps on other characters too. Because this is a sky camp with a launch pad, I didn't use the breakable vendor here. But I usually only use this one during aliens. If only I could get the rare sun mask. This is Sleazy's Speak Easy build, the Dead Brahmin. I just store the vendor in this one as well because I seldom use it, other than to work on shelter stuff or maze ideas. It is a pretty low traffic area in the mire. Even though I tried to make the entrance obvious, people still can't find it. So I didn't bother with a breakable vendor. I don't know what I was thinking when I built this, but I like it so I keep it around. Another way we can keep others out is to put them in a locked room. This camp is on the Molly character. I probably use her the most, so I play on public teams a lot with her. I tried to be creative with the locked vendor on this build, hoping to avoid the "Where's your vendor" messages. I think they get the point. If I want to open the vendors, I just make the wall a door. I do the same thing at the meditation center. No, this really isn't a trap, too obvious anyway, and has been done to many times. But again, just changing the wall to a door opens the shop. This is by Foundation for the free fast travelers. Kinda goof camp, but uses the breakable vendor. The setups are all the same. After the switch and breakers are wired, I put the rug through a door. Once it is working and I have everything where I want it, I change the door to a wall. Can use the build mode trick here. This keeps players out and the vendors off. The damn cow had to be in the way. But the 180 trap is just on the other side. When repaired, the other stuff pops up and becomes active. Now I can either turn the camp on, or thus leave it, as a ton of players pass through here. Next I will show you a few in-game structure floats. This is Freddy's crater camp from the story. Because it is so well hidden, I use this one a lot when on public teams. It is also close enough to crater that if I do run the vendor, people will fast travel free there. It also has a ton of loot. Another underground build, I keep everything below. Public team hoppers message me on this one a lot. This build took a while to get right, not only for the story, but because I wanted to keep it and use it. So I had to get everything just right. But the vendor is floated through the in-game structure, and looks like I just set stuff in there when active. I can just turn it off if I need to use it for the story too. A couple more in-game structure builds. This is the cabin near milepost 0. It comes with a free dog. But again, you don't see anything at first glance. The camp is below like a lot of mine. This took a while to get the float hidden under the cabin. I tried a version of level 1 for the new Christmas maze here, but it didn't work out during beta testing, so I scrapped it. The vendor floats on the porch when activated. I have two camps near the mansions that use the truck as the float. These also took a while to get everything to sit in them, but when they are off, there are no indications of a camp except on the compass. We can get pretty creative with the vendor floats. This camp was one of my first in-game structure builds. I have done a lot with it over the years. With the addition Skyline Valley, it kinda gave it some new life, as players are in the area more often. A few more single vendor float camps. Then I will show you a couple of double floats and floats with traps. All work the same way. This is my contribution to the new Skyline Drive update. It has two floats, but they don't overlap. I used Yasmin in this one to give it some life and maintain the Sleazy's theme. The chuck wagon, if placed correctly, can be perfectly hidden for your entrance. The vendor is floated on the counter. You can see I use the rug setup most of the time, like I showed you in the second video. This is so I can move it into position without having to rebuild it a ton of times to get it right. The other float is near the street to help players out who are running caravans. It has a workbench, stash boxes, and some turrets. If stuff gets damaged, you can break it and then repair it all for 1 wood. If the vendor is off from up top, it is only an immersive build. There are also a couple of bobblehead and magazine spawns here. 1 in the truck and 2 inside on the counter. The trailer in the street has a pre-war food spawn for dailies. The Mistress of Mystery build incorporates sleazies with a counter float for the vendor. If on public teams, it again is only an immersive build at initial glance with the vendor off. And funny as hell if you are into the lore of the game. Like the others, the vendor can be turned on from below and floats on the counter. Now a couple of dual floats. I had to take advantage of the animation with this one. When the vendor is off, it appears to other players as just an in-game structure. But when both floats are activated, it is pretty funny and functional. I used a single rug for both floats here because they were in the same spot and also at the same level. And when activated, the roof comes to life, and Steven goes to work. Poor Steven, but he is an easy one to pick on. I guess this is what a Diddy party would be like in Fallout. I'll show you a couple overlap traps with breakable vendors. The voting booth. You can see by the candidates it hasn't been used in a while. When I do a trap base, I try to do something new or funny. I generally stick to mazes and stuff, and leave the traps up to the pros. I was trying to make a point with this one, as well as test out a new maze idea. I think only one person ever found the chair. But the vendor overlaps with the traps here, and then everything goes off when it is triggered. Or I can just run a vendor if I want. But if anyone would figure it out, I think they would get the message.
Trappers are total losers with small wieners that live in their mom's basement.
Like I said, I was trying to make a point with it. Ah, Christmas time. Another ground glitch camp that uses a breakable vendor with a trap overlap. The mome rafts help keep players from jumping out and make it a little less obvious that it is a trap base. Oddly enough, I have had a ton of players ask me how I did this one after I trapped them. One player, a long time ago, waited in stealth for an hour to see where the entrance was, then messaged me, so I showed them how to build it. They went on to become Trapper royalty, and then got banned. I showed this one in part 1, but added some stuff to it to show you a multi-switch camp. Again, no indication of a camp except on the compass. When I am trying out new maze ideas, I will put sections of them out for players to try, so I can see if they work and get some feedback. We can float several of the shelters on the rugs. The ground shelters won't work, like the bus and the large vault, but the others will place, so they too can be turned on and off. And just to show you the versatility of the rug float, this is level 1 of the Meat Week maze. This was a tough one, so not a lot of players figured it out. But it was fun to build and came out really cool. It also gives other players a chance to experience an underground camp with a float switch. I was hoping players would be inspired to use this and build some cool stuff out there. But I usually got the
Where's your vendor?
bullshit. Alright, let's build. The basic setup for Breakable anything is the same. Some 90s or 180s, a rug, 2 floor conduits, a switch, and generator. Put the conduits on the rug and wire them together. Then the trap goes on one conduit, then gets wired to the other. Place the switch and generator on the rug. Wire the switch in series to the generator and the conduit that does not have the trap on it. If done correctly, it should break. We can float any floor items, but for the breakable vendor I use 2 rugs, or a small stash box and a rug. Stack the floor items and place on the camp module, then bounce the item in the lower position. This will push the item on top up, or float it. I am using this location, so you can see not only an in-game structure float, but you can imagine that the roof of the structure was the ground in an underground build. It can take some time to get the correct position. If you go too far, you can always place the lower item on a depressed pressure plate and merge it back down. If you are doing multiple floats, like the roof one I showed you earlier, count the first one, and then bounce the second the same amount of times. When you have the desired height, pick up the lower item and place it on the trap. Now you can pick up the rug and move everything around together to get perfect placement. Not only can we move through walls and floors, but also in-game structures and the ground if building hidden bases. Again, imagine that the roof in this example is the ground. As long as you can place another object on the rug, it will act as one entity and break when the switch is activated. But for the breakable vendor, just place it on the rug. If we add multiple rugs or floor items, we can stack other floor items on top. You can have breakable turrets, decorations, and even your entire camp, as long as it is a floor item that will place. To have multiple floats that overlap, break the first one, and then activate the second to place and build. When lined up where you want it, break that one, and do a third, fourth, etc. If you are building a trap overlap, you may want to mark the corners with plushies or gunshots. This helps if you are trying to float them through a prefab. If you are using a prefab, you can get your float setup built first, break everything, and then place the prefab. Some prefabs can be broken with a flamer trap, but not all floats will go through them that way. I have better luck building the breaker floats first, marking them, and then placing the prefab last. As you can see, most floor items place and break on the setup in this example. So just keep playing with it until you get what you want. If you do multiple floats, you can overlap and intersect objects for a really cool effect. I hope this explained the breakable vendor a little better for you. Building in the game, for me, is one of the coolest things we can do. It is our individual chance to inspire and enhance the experience for other players. Also, it is a lot of fun coming up with new things, new tricks, and new ideas. Enjoy the process and go build something great.